quickly start on our topic about use case with commercial application, right? So we are all practitioners here. We do a lot of different consultancy, different tech integration and so forth. So we will have a good discussion after this. So before I go to that, let's have a brief introduction, for all our panelists. Maybe start off with yourself.
Yeah, sure. No, my name is Juan. I own Blok Assets. We're a tokenization firm based out of Puerto Rico. We build legal structures within the SEC and the FCA, so you can tokenize assets all around. Yeah, that's really all we do.
Hello, I'm Gavin, co-founder of 10, and we're building an encrypted layer 2 for Ethereum.
Nice.
I'm Josh Wyant. I'm building Novapolis. I'm the founder, and Novapolis is a decentralized cloud platform with a community-centric piece, community and sorry, my brain's not working today, but yeah.
All good. Hi, I'm Cal. I'm one of the lead developers for SilentSwap. It's a privacy swap powered by Secret Network. Essentially, any asset in from 8 EVM chains so far, and any asset out within anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. So
nice. A quick introduction from my end. I'm a book author, investor. In fact, I'm a very proactive investor looking at privacy issues, and so forth. And in fact, recently we also launched a fund that's called Lift, LIFT. Is part of a meme called Layer One, and that we will try to advocate a lot of this privacy stuff, within the whole meme network, and also, of course, the more enterprise guys as well. So that I will go into that a little bit later. So the first question is more straightforward. What is the most prominent case study that you have, in your mind when we talk about protecting your privacy? What kind of good case study you have that you would like to share with all our audiences here today?
I'll take that one first.
Sure.
The Italian banking system is currently run partially on blockchain. So it's using an enterprise-grade blockchain, which means that privacy is already intentionally built into the design. I think what's interesting about that use case, and they've been doing that successfully for a couple of years, and they get efficiencies in their settlement. And what's interesting is that if they actually had an option to move to public blockchain, where you had confidential compute, then they wouldn't have that lock-in. So they're suffering a vendor lock-in with this enterprise blockchain. So if you can bring privacy to public blockchains through multiple solutions like ours, like everybody in this room, then you suddenly have competition. And if you get more competition, then that encourages better pricing, and it's a better deal for the consumer at the end of it.
Nice. What about Cal? What are some of the good commercial use cases?
So initially we built this product for end users, just like consumer users, right? And then we spoke at some of these events, and then people approached us and they were like, hey, our clients are business clients and they need privacy too, right? And so we've heard some examples range from hey, our users are competitors, they don't want to be tracked by each other, and so on and so forth. And so it's really kind of endless when you think about it. Like in Web 2, businesses don't track each other's addresses or bank accounts. It's just kind of makes sense. It's kind of self-explanatory. Why would you have to explain your credit card statement to your competitors? So it started, one of the interesting use cases was VCs being copy traded. So competitive traders were being front run by their competitors, and we're talking about people that are trading millions of dollars a day. So it's that, although we were building a consumer application, these kind of situations these conversations happened, and now we're kind of gearing up to build a whole SDK business to business side of SilentSwap. So but we've seen just every single one of these use cases. It just makes sense, right? In Web 2, you really don't have that problem built in.
I think at least in our end, when it comes to real world assets, one of the biggest use cases that we actually need, there's really no protocol for, is when it comes to transfer agents. Whenever you tokenize an asset in a form of security, you need that transfer agent to be transferring it around if you want to resell it in the secondary market. As of right now, there is no transfer agent that does it properly, if I'm honest. There's a couple in the United States that are connected within the SEC, but when you touch FCA or any other other regulatory body, there really isn't a transfer agent that has, I guess, that back end software where it actually protects you, and that it has that data privacy layer on it. So I think that's actually needed. I haven't seen anything around that. So yeah, I would say that's probably one of the best for sure.
Yeah, I mean, confidential computing is very important, especially as you start to decentralize. When you need anything from user authentication to customer data, or just user data, the user protecting their own data. I think this is very important for advertising, for example, for the consumer. You have people's data is being sold and used and abused, and people really don't own their data. And so if you're able to do something like privacy preserving advertising, which you can do with confidential computing, it really starts to kind of change the game there for privacy, and kind of flips everything on its head. So now the consumer is able to control what happens with their data, and be able to even monetize their data, being able to have ads targeted to them without anybody actually seeing their data or exposing their data to the companies that are doing the advertising.
Okay, maybe the follow-up question, about this is, we talk about confidential computing, and then for myself, I speak to a lot of different governments, and then some of them, they will pop up the question about, isn't Web3, all about privacy? Some of them will say things like this, and then they will say that, then from a government perspective, how can we, take part in this whole exercise? Do you have some views on how use cases can be more carefully dealt with when you deal with some governments? Cal, or yeah.
Yeah, I think that for governance, confidential computing is also really useful. If you look at like Secret, who is building smart contracts with confidential computing, it keeps these details private, but it's also verifiable. Confidential computing is verifiable, and with that, you're able to do secure voting and all sorts of things without really running into issues of things getting exposed or tampered with.
Agree.
One of the other things is like voter bias. Like if everyone, like addresses are known on chain, like some of the bigger names have well-known addresses. Of Talik has his address everywhere. Every time he makes a move, like the market's affected by it. This guy can't make a move. He can't send funds to his family if he wanted to without moving markets, right? So it's like, if in terms of like governance and everything like that, you kind of want to be able to have that privacy and avoid bias just because you're more private, right? Another thing, it's like when it comes to like government, and I don't know if the conversation is like keeping private from the government, or will the government use privacy layers? But it's all about like the on-ramp and off-ramp, right? But that's kind of a different conversation, right?
But the thing is this, when you talk to different governments, of course we provide a certain solution, right? And then they would say, oh, this is good, this is what you can do. But most of the time, they are thinking about the anger, of, hey man, how am I going to tax you, right? How are we going to tax Vitalik, for example?
Well, there's a few things with confidential computing. The government can actually enforce certain computation, whether that's they're doing digital IDs or something like that. They have more flexibility to enforce certain restrictions on citizens, like if they really wanted to.
But what about yourself? I mean, there's a fine line between privacy and also money laundering. In some ways, how do you differentiate this? Because whenever you explain to a certain government, or maybe part of the Ministry of Finance, for example, all these questions are going to pop out. What's your view? I know Cal is going to say something, but
I think these guys have summed it up really well so far. But I think the only comment is that the challenge is for governments to look at privacy in a completely different way, because your point about money laundering, it exists now, and that's without blockchain. And I think picking on specific challenges that might come with privacy is unfair, when the full upside about having privacy, where you can have digital identities, where governments can be certain that the information that is being used is secure, and it's not at risk of being sold to nefarious actors, is actually a better end state than we're in now. I think it just has to be a balance.
What about you?
Yeah, at least in our end, again, speaking about whenever you tokenize an asset, you need to know if it's an accredited investor. He needs to KYC, he needs to AMN, all these things. So I think sometimes people see it in the wrong ways, like you're mentioning, money laundering. But at the end of the day, for that person to even be onboarded, you need to know what he's doing. He needs to do the AML process and all these things. So I think that's not the proper way to look at it. So yeah, I guess it's just better explaining to do. Really, we need to explain to them that, again, there's a whole process before that onboarding part, which you can't skip, right?
That I agree, because you are targeting accredited investors.
Yeah,
right.
right. Yeah.
So the KYB, KYC is there. What do you have to add, man, Kel?
I mean, I kind of added everything in the initially. I lost my thought. I was gonna add something else.
You smile when I mentioned about money laundering.
Well, one thing is, again, with enforcement, for example, you can prove to the government that, say, everyone on your exchange has a smart contract where basically all of their transactions can generate an actual reports, like a 1099 or something like that.
Okay. Maybe I'll skip to the next question. Something more practical. I mentioned about I have a new fund called Lift, and it's part of a meme layer one called Meme Core. We had a conversation last week about how starting new projects on the layer one. How to keep the founders or the devs in a more private manner. How the wallets can be kind of accounted for, but not exposed to everybody. So all these things came up. And then the next thing that we started talking about, about privacy and all these things, is then we realized that, actually in the meme community, we don't really talk too much about privacy, and do you think that, in a meme project, for example, is privacy really that important? How can we deal with privacy in a nicer manner, so that everybody can accept that that developer is actually dogs, the developer is not dogs? Is there something that you would like to add on to that?
I guess I can go. So I think that for any, like, even for fun purposes, it's good to have like an anonymous persona. For example, when you're trading these meme coins, or maybe you're author of an NFT or whatever it is, you with confidential computing, you can do things like attest that you have certain credentials or you're a certain type of user without revealing your identity, without revealing your real identity, and you can potentially even use multiple identities for different purposes. So that was one of my thoughts. I can't remember the other one.
Yeah, so that persona, when you're trading meme coins in a Telegram group with a bunch of other guys that are anonymous behind a Telegram handle, it's like, well, their anonymity is just fine with this random address and this Telegram handle that was generated, right? The privacy conversation gets a lot more interesting when you include like the kind of break between Web 2 and Web 3, or like, IRL businesses adopting cryptocurrency. That's where it's going to be really useful, right? Like if I'm interacting with my wallet and someone knows that this is my wallet somehow, and I go to, in the future, pay, or well, you could do it now. You could go to Starbucks down the street and pay, and I've not only doxed my wallet, how much I've spent, but my location now is doxed. So it's like, that's where it's much more applicable. I don't know, you're anonymous enough as a meme user. I don't know who's chasing you, but if you have a Telegram,
if you make good money,
yeah, what I'm saying. Funny story. It's like SilentSwap's founder Satoshi. He wanted this because he kept on being tracked. This guy he was I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the trade from $8,000 to $5.3 billion in Shiba Inu. He was that guy who did the trade. And so like his life is like all about protecting his identity, protecting his family, protecting his wealth. And that wasn't even what made him wealthy. He was a billionaire before that, but it's just one of those things where he's solving the problem for himself first. So, you know, I guess maybe meme coin traders do think about it a lot more than you'd think, right? If you make it, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing.
One good trade.
Of course. Anything else to add? You know, from that perspective? No. Okay. Another more practical question. You know, we have friends, you know, who are developing, you know, maybe SilentSwap and other confidential computing kind of dApps and so forth. You know, but to me, you know, a lot of this good tech is not promoted in a way that is maybe too effective. You know, people do not know about the chain. You know, people do not know the existence, you know, of what we are trying to do. You know, is there any way, you know, in your capacity, you know, from your company, what are some of the ways that you try to educate, you know, some of your users? You know, how do you effectively convey and target your target audiences? You know, maybe you could share some of the things that you have done.
Yeah. You know, it's an interesting question because we see a lot in the crypto industry and the Web3 industry and all these things, people attaching utility tokens to platform and getting all complicated with the wordings and all these things. Again, I can speak in the RWA side.
Correct.
So they always have on their website, oh, we're using this technology, this NFT, this and that, yada, yada. But again, I don't think they've realize that at the end of the day, whenever you're tokenizing an asset, at least your client is not going to be that degen that gets 100% in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Is that retail investor that isn't TradFi, that he's used to old regulations, he's used to that vocabulary. So I don't know if it's an issue that it's not marketed enough. I just think it's an issue of the way that is being communicated, right? It's not being communicated to the right audience. So I think if that approach changes, it'll be a lot better. Because again, people are designing utility tokens, for example, with platforms, and they're like, in order for you to access and have these benefits, you need to go to a MetaMask, you need to go to Swap, and you got to get ETH, you got to swap it for the token. No enterprise is going to do that, right? So I think that's a big issue, that onboarding process and the way that's communicated, it's not being done properly, I would say. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, it depends. To answer your question, it depends who you're trying to attract, and you're absolutely right, Juan. If you're going after the degens in Web3, then you know there's a whole marketing playbook that you can just roll out. You know, it's tried and tested over the last 3-4 years. I think to your point, if you're trying to attract the guy on the street who has nothing to do with crypto or Web3, your best bet is to not mention that at all. Don't mention the B word. There was a news report a week ago. CCP Games came out with Eve Frontier. Sounds amazing. Uses blockchain, and their entire community just dumped on it because they mentioned blockchain, and it's already getting a bad reputation out there outside of Web3. So I think crucially, builders like us, you know, builders out there, if you're going to build an application that you want to appeal to the masses and you want to unlock that potential that really is in blockchain, you need to take away all that terminology out of the marketing. You know, just hide it.
But when you look at the enterprise users, for example, you still need to educate them, right? You know, like 1 month ago, I was in Cambodia. You know, they have the whole suite of things that are on chain. You know, whether it's their IDs or and so forth and so on. They managed to convince themselves that, hey, you know, blockchain is a good thing, right? Maybe they do not have that extra ultra layer or about privacy and so forth. You know, but you know, at least they are convinced. You know, so I'm really thinking really hard. You know, how do maybe you or your company, you know, convince different sets of target users. It could be enterprise users, it could be retail guys, it could be the next door degen guy as well. You know, what's your view? Education?
So, just to touch on the topic as a whole, I think from both a marketing and an implementation perspective, the end result of everything we're doing here is going to be chain abstraction, account abstraction. Web3 is going to look exactly like Web2 does today. You have 30, 40 years of experience building user experience, building not UI, but the interaction between people and money, people and assets. And we're not going to throw that out. Nobody, you're not going to have, 7 billion people download MetaMask. That's not what's going to happen, right? We're going to find some sort of balance between decentralization and user experience. And blockchains are just going to be on the back end of everything, right? I open Chase app, it's going to show my bank account, but on the back end, it'll be on a blockchain somewhere or wherever, right? So both, it's going to be abstracting it away from the marketing and the message, simplifying the message is one thing, but like the implementation itself is going to be abstracted away from the user. And there's trade-offs there, sure, but it's similar to what we're doing with SilentSwap. It's like we're giving privacy to EVM users, and we're using secret network to do that, but it's being abstracted away from them, right? And that's what I think is going to happen to 99% of these very useful utilities that are being released, very useful products that are being built. They have to be abstracted away in some way, shape, or form, because the end user probably doesn't understand it completely. So yeah.
I think every great platform needs a killer app. And, when you have your killer app and the users are using it, they don't necessarily, especially with confidential computing, they don't need to know what the platform is that they're running it on. But if it's a killer app and it takes off, and then people see that, well, first of all, your platform is validated, and then second of all, people can really start to scrutinize your platform. And in that case, the users don't have to know anything. Most people don't have to really know anything about it. But once it becomes more popular and people really start to realize, hey, like this really does have great security properties. It has a lot of nice things that we want for our app, for our whatever we're going to build on your platform. Then or even just the brand of the underlying platform, the user is going to say, hey, like this app is great, and like I want to use another app that's built on this platform.
Yeah, I think we will be really successful if we stop talking about blockchain and everyone is just using it, right? So the last final question is, what are the top use cases for dApps, decentralized application, that are still emerging and provide the highest value to commercial adoption of blockchain, in your opinion,
So, in my opinion, trade finance. I think it's ripe for improvement. The amount of paperwork involved in trade finance is mind-boggling. It's very antiquated, and it needs to change. It needs to be more efficient. But the one underlying issue, if Alice wants to buy 500,000 LCD screens from Bob and it's going to cost 5 million, how's Bob going to know he's going to get his 5 million even before he turns on the factory? So there's a whole ream of legal framework to help that happen, and loads of third parties, loads of friction. And crucially, if that ever gets, for that to be modernized and for that to be more efficient, there'd be a reliance on, at the moment, pre-blockchain, there's a reliance on a single party to be responsible for all of that. And it's a global business. Nobody in the world is going to pick one company to be able to look after all of that. And this is where blockchain really, really solves the issue, where you can have private blockchain essentially, where you have multiple untrusted counterparties all working together. And because you're relying on the technology and the confidentiality and the encryption within the technology, then you can start achieving a far more efficient global trade finance. That if that came reality, we would have made it without a shadow of a doubt.
There's a lot of work to be done, from a supply chain and so forth. So it's a big thing. Yes.
Yeah, no, I agree with them. In the TradFi world, we've seen a lot of projects trying to do swaps for private placements that acts as somewhat as a peer-to-peer system, and you eliminate that the third party like he's mentioning. I haven't seen somebody that has done it just because of the regulatory side of it. I think that needs a little bit of improvement, either in the government level. I'm not sure how that would work really, but I would say, yeah, if somebody can figure out that swap side of, again, if you and me want to do a private placement, maybe I have 10% of a hotel and he has 10% of an emerald mine, we want to swap it, it's just a swap, right? And we don't have to do anything else. So yeah, I think that would be definitely pretty interesting.
Sure.
I think Web 2 to Web 3 is probably kind of the holy grail of Web 3, or maybe even beyond Web 3. I think that confidential computing has the potential to go beyond Web 3. And I think that The problem with Web3 is that it's really, really hard, as currently as things are, to be able to create like a real good app that is able to have a user keep their private data, to be able to have it fully interactable, to have all sorts of stuff that Web 2 already has, and you just have to jump through hoops. And I think that confidential computing has the potential to create something that essentially can run Web 2 applications, some potentially even unmodified, with some APIs that give them privacy preserving features. And that's kind of the thing that we're hoping to do with Novapolis.
So I think the most exciting thing for me right now is intense and intent-centric trading models. Like the situation that you guys are describing right now in an intent trading platform, you guys each would put an order into the order book, and whether you know you want to trade to each other or to the public, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I want for it. You guys would be able to solve each other's order with a coincidence of wants. And so like that's like the next, it seems Web3, like AMMs seems so efficient compared to traditional finance. That is 100% true. And then like the next step of that is like intent models, where me and you, we're not market makers. We don't know what the best price is. We don't know what what's the best way to execute a trade of some sort. But solvers that are experts in what assets they're specifically solving for. In your case, it might be a real-world asset solver, and I'm sure there could be privacy solvers as well. But I think that's going to be the future of everything. Everything we're building is going to be rebuilt at some point within the next couple of years, based on intents, and that's also leads into like account abstraction, chain abstraction. That's going to be the rails for adoption, essentially.
Well, great insights. I would say that we talk a lot about Web3 and so forth, but the future is there. We should really embrace different technology. Maybe AI could solve some of the different problems, or maybe in the future there could be a Web 4 or Web 5 or whatever, right? So thank the panelists. If you have any other questions, please approach all of us. Let's have a chat. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.